He actually he's joining me today. Jaspreet Singh Sidhu. He's a community leader as well for youngsters. He is at Fresno State. He's a San Unified School District, Central High School graduate, valedictorian. So he actually brought up a question for you. So here, Jaspreet.
Good.
Hey, Mr. Costa.
How are you?
Hello, Mr.
Yes. How are you doing?
Oh, there you go. Hi, Mr. Costa. I'm great. I have a couple questions. I'm your constituent. More importantly, I'm a Fresno State student. So there's been actually a pledge going online for the past week. It's actually been taking, it's making big waves across our Democratic circles. And I was wondering if you're on board. I'll just give you a little tidbit of what it is and who's on board so far. So far, groups like PCCC and Justice Democrats have signed it. Congressman Ro Khanna, representing California's 17th District, Congressman AOC, former Senator Mike Gravel, presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, and then presidential candidate and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. They've all signed this pledge, and it's a simple pledge. There's 5 points on it, and we're not holding your feet to the fire, telling you to sign it. It's just because like the word progressive has been used very loosely, so we're just trying to get the word progressive. We're trying to define it, and we use these 5 pillars. And so far, this petition has 17,000 signatures online, and it has 8,000 volunteers. So the first point, see, these are just like yes or no questions. So the first point is higher wages. So it's a progressive economic pledge, and the first point is higher wages. Do you pledge to fight for a $15 minimum wage and collective bargaining and work for American workers instead of corporate donors?
Yes.
Then second point is Medicare for all. I pledge to fight for a single-payer Medicare for all system that transforms healthcare in this country into a right, not a privilege.
I supported the Affordable Health Care Act, and I believe that we need to continue to make improvements on it in terms of ensuring that we have access for health care for all Americans, which is the goal. I think that when we talk about Medicare for all, we've got to be very careful to define what that means. People have insurance, union workers and others that they like very much. Other people have their insurance that they like very much. When you're talking about ensuring that we have access for health care for all Americans, you don't want to do so at the cost of taking people's health care away that they already like and want to keep. So I think that the general concept of ensuring that there's a safety net and everybody has access to good, affordable health care with reduced prescription costs for drugs is what I want to do and what I am working on. But the general statement, Medicare for all, I think doesn't take into account that there are many in this country who have good health insurance unions that have negotiated as a part of their contracts and want to keep that. And so we must be careful not to ensure that when we talk about a general term as Medicare for all, that we don't take away people's health care, their insurance, who are very satisfied with it. And we've got to make a better health care system, and I think that's the general concept of the pledge you're talking about. But I think there are a host of issues that are in that statement that have to be worked on.
So just a quick follow-up. So let's say Medicare for all was on a bill and it needed 1 or 2 votes to swing the vote. Which way would you vote for it?
Well, but you're not taking into account the point I just made to you.
Yes.
You're giving me a hypothetical without the details of what's contained in the legislation, and that's not fair.
Okay, good enough. And then number 3, we have the Green New Deal. So this is just, I know like the Green New Deal, the left wing, our Democratic Party has just made it into like a grab bag where everyone's just throwing their own legislation into it. But so this one I defined specifically. I pledge to fight for a 10-year plan to mobilize every aspect of American society to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions and create millions of new highway jobs by building and creating an infrastructure and new industries in this new economy.
I have supported a host of green efforts from reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. And I think the California example is much more effective than many of the aspirational goals in the new Green Deal. We have now achieved almost 40%, and if you count hydroelectric, over 40% of the power used in California is non-fossil fuel burning. We have now implemented incentives for solar and wind power in California that are among the highest in the nation. And I think that people need to do comparative analysis as what's been successful. If the rest of the country had been as successful as California, and we're moving even further ahead with Governor Newsom, it far, I think, surpasses what is contained in the new Green Deal. And we're getting that done here in California today. And I am committed to continuing that effort.
Number 4 is a college for all. So this one's actually pretty important to me as a college student. So this one is I pledge to fight for free college for all so that everyone can get to live the American dream and not just the wealthy elite. So what's your stance on college for all?
Well, I've supported the Pell Grant funding. 80% of the students at UC or Merced are on some form of student aid. 70% of them are the first in their family to go to university. Similar is the case at Fresno State, where you are going to school and where I graduated from. I'm having a meeting this morning when I get off the phone with you with President Castro to talk about ways in which we can provide more access to students. We have a system in California that provides an education for our state of 1.5 million students in community colleges, state universities, and the University of California, unparalleled anywhere else in the world. And I think that we can continue to improve on that system. But what you've got to do when you talk about free education for all is you've got to figure out how you're going to make that work. And that's where my focus is, because I want to make sure that you and other students like yourself don't graduate and have a student debt that you are dealing with for years afterwards that hinder your ability to be successful. And I think that's where we've got to focus our effort.
Just a quick follow-up on that one. I think the plan they're going for is a plan like Germany and Sweden and Norway, who all have free higher college. Japan, they free up community colleges. And then the reason I'm concerned about this one personally is because I don't get Pell Grants or student aids, but I have a family of 3, so we have 2 workers and then 1 student, so we don't qualify. So I get hit with a $3,200 bill every semester, and that adds up over the course of 4 years, 5 years, however long I plan to study there. So that's why this is a personal concern for me.
Well, I know, and in Europe, I've studied their system, and they have 2 tracks. So you are required to make a choice in your teens, mid-teens. Do you want to go into a university track, or do you want to proceed a job training skill set that puts you in another job track? And that has its own issues that are positive and negative. So I think we need to have an examination in the United States on how we want to promote our education system. But something that gets overlooked in this whole conversation, people running for president and people running for Congress talk about wanting to be the education president. 90% of the funding in America for education comes from local and state government. At the federal level, we provide 10% of the funding for public education in America. And so I think we need to have an honest conversation. Do we want to increase the federal government's role in public education in America? Because you're not going to fix our schools in Washington, D.C., as long as the federal government is a minor contributor to the overall funding of public education in our country. At the university level, we provide money for research. We provide money for Pell Grants, but it's very limited. So these folks running for a higher office, wanting to fix our schools, ignore the fact that traditionally our federal government has played a very limited role in public education in America.
All right, and then real quick, final question. We have ending the corruption. So I pledge to fight for a constitutional amendment to ban the private financing of elections and to use all available paths to an amendment so we can once again have fair and free elections.
There's nothing I would prefer more than not to have to raise money for campaigning. I think I've supported public financing for campaigns for a long time. I think that there's far too much money involved in this process, and I would love to see a alternative, as they have in other parts of the world, where people running for office are not required to spend as much time as they do to raise monies to advocate on the positions, on the issues that they feel strongly about, so the public will be informed. There's the short answer is yes.
Okay, and then a follow-up real quick. So there's been another petition going on online, and this is just one single question. And then the question is, would you be in favor of putting body cameras on U.S. representatives and senators so the constituents know what lobbying groups visit the representative during business hours?
That's silly. That's silly. Would you want to put a body camera on you as a free citizen of this country so I can know everything you're doing? At some point, is there not a requirement that we have privacy and we have integrity and we have respect for one another?
Just like police officers have a body camera now.
But that's entirely different. That's entirely different.
Okay. Thank you for your answers, Jim Costa. I look forward to having conversations with you in the future, too.
Okay, thank you.
So, Congressman Costa, thank you so much. That was our Fresno State student who wanted to ask you some questions. So, thank you so much for answering them. Before I know you have to go to the meeting, so I have one more question.